Hello everyone, I'm Tara, the dance doctor. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I teach you 7 different ways you can use your hips in a bachata basic. So if your bachata basic are your normal everyday clothes, these hip actions are like your accessories that you use to jazz up your outfit. The thing that I love about teaching concepts like this also is you can do them on your own, but you can also do all the things that I teach in today's video while you're dancing with a partner. Nothing that I'm teaching will affect his lead whatsoever. So they're really great things to know because they're extremely versatile and they will help you give a little extra oomph, elegance, sexiness to your bachata dancing. We're gonna get right into the lesson. I just wanna remind you to give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the post notifications so you can see when I upload more stuff like this. Also, if you don't already, go ahead and follow me on Instagram at DanceDoctorOnline so that you can get updates and see other videos that I post. Now let's get dancing. The first bachata hip action that we're going to use today is just our standard Latin motion, which means that I'm going to step onto a bent knee every time I take a step, which is going to create a tilt in my pelvis because my hip is staying behind with my straight leg. So it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. And also you'll notice that on this version of the basic, I'm going to just bring my foot in on the tap and bring my hip over to the standing leg so that I'm ready to step out onto a bent knee in the next part of my basic. I'm not going to do any extra hip action on the tap. We will do that later in this video. So let's just practice doing that basic hip action. So I go onto a bent knee, leaving my other knee straight, and I switch, bring my foot in. Now I'm going on to a bent knee on my left, switch, bent, switch, bring the foot in to tap, hip over. Now I'm leaving my hip where it is, and I'm going to step out. So all I'm doing here really is moving my foot. Step, switch, step, switch, step, switch, and tap. Step, switch, step, switch, step, switch, and tap. Step, switch, step, switch, step, switch, tap. If you want to add a little bit more hip action and core action while you're doing this, I encourage you when you're here and you're doing the switching to actually pull your pelvis up and over using your abdominals, which will accentuate and enhance your movement a little bit more. So in order to get the feeling of this, if you want to stand with 2 straight legs, without bending, try and move your hips side to side. So that's the feeling that we're going to have, which is, again, going to help us get a little bit more action out of this. So I go step, straighten, and I'm moving my hip from my center, and then I bring my foot in. Straighten, move the hip from the center, instead of only doing it as a reaction to the knee straightening. I would say doing it from the knee, that would be like level 1, and then if you want to get more advanced, you can start to use your core to move your hip over, bring the leg in, step, move the hip over. So as you can see, that gives me an exaggerated movement in my center. So now let's practice this version of the basic with music. So in this video, each time we dance with music, I'm going to start by doing 4 basics half-time, and then we will go real-time. So there won't be a pause in between. I'll go straight from the 4th half-time basic right into the first real-time basic. 5, 6, ready, we go. 1, The next version of the basic that we're going to do is leading with our hip. So whereas in the last version we were leaving our hip behind, it was the last thing to come over, in this version of the basic it's going to be the first thing. It's going to lead my movement. So it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. And on this one I am adding a hip pulse on the tap, okay? So let me first explain what is happening in the pelvis. I feel like I'm using my side abdominals to lift my pelvis up toward my rib cage. So I always talk about like the hip bone, the top of your hip bone, trying to connect with your bottom rib. So if you're just standing here, you want to try to use your obliques to lift that hip and then put it down. Put your weight down on that foot. Then you lift the hip and put the weight down on the foot. I'll do this with my feet open so you can see a little bit better. Lift and come down onto that leg, onto a bent knee. Lift, come down. Lift the hip and drop your weight onto that foot. Lift and drop, lift and drop. So this is a really good exercise to do to also build your strength and flexibility in your side abs, which are very important for all the Latin actions that we do. So when we're applying this action to our Bachata basic, I'm going to lift my hip and move the foot over and step on it. Lift the hip, bring the foot in and step on it. Lift the hip, step, and then here I'm going to bring my foot in and tap. And on this tap, I'm pushing into the ground. In this case, it's my left foot. I'm pushing into the ball of my foot like I'm trying to straighten my knee. It doesn't quite get there, but in that process, it's lifting my hip, and then I want to make sure I drop it back down. A common error that people make when they do this type of bachata tap is they only lift and they never come back down, and then it has a very awkward effect on their dancing. So I always compare this movement to like a bell swinging. It swings up and it has to swing back down, okay? So let's try this version of the basics slowly a few times. So I'm going to start with my right foot free, and I go lift, come down, lift, come down, lift, come down, and pulse. And lift, 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 pulse. And lift, 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 pulse, lift, 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 pulse. So it's going to feel a little counterintuitive to bring your feet together while you're lifting your hip in the opposite direction, but the more you practice it, the more natural it will feel. We go lift, lift, lift. So it doesn't matter which direction your foot is moving in, you're always going to lift the foot or the hip of the foot that's about to step, and it could go in any direction. It doesn't have to always go sideways, okay? So now, let's try this version of the basic with music. 5, 6, ready, half time. Okay, so our next hip action that we're going to practice in our Bachata basic is a figure 8 starting forward. So it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay, I'm also on the tap, I'm doing a half circle back, which I'll explain in a moment. So when we're doing a figure 8, we're basically doing our basic Latin hip action, but we are adding a forward and around action in the hips. So instead of simply tilting the hips now, I'm going to step onto a bent knee, and then as I switch, I'm going to bring my hip forward and around before I take the next step. So I'll show you from the back. We go step, push forward and around. Step, push forward and around. Step, push forward and around, and tap. Step, push forward, side, back. Step, push forward, side, back. Step, push forward, side, back, and tap. A common mistake that my students make when they're doing the figure 8 action is they start to want to do the 8 with every part of their body. So it's very important that as we do this, we're keeping our shoulders and our feet square. We're not going to be swiveling our feet, and we're not going to be twisting our shoulders. We are just isolating the hips. And on the forward action, what I always tell people is to try and flatten out this hip flexor before you go side and back. So again, we go step, half of the 8, step, other half of the 8. Step, half of the 8, and tap. Step, half of the 8, step, half, and tap. Now, on the tap, what I'm doing in this specific application is I'm doing a half circle back. So I'm going step, 8, step, 8, step, 8, and as I tap, I'm doing a half circle. Step, and step, and step, and circle. Step, and step, and step, and circle. I'm sorry, when I was doing it slowly, I was doing the circle to the wrong side, but just now I did it correctly. So when I bring my foot into tap, my half circle back is going to go toward my standing leg, not toward the tapping leg. I just think it flows better that way, although you could do it either way. So I'm going step, figure 8, step, figure 8, step, figure 8, and then I'm going to keep this movement going into a half circle until I come back into neutral, and then I'm going to go to the other side. Step, figure 8, step, figure 8, step, figure 8, keep it going, neutral. Step, figure 8, step, figure 8, step, figure 8, keep it going, neutral. Step, and step, and step, and keep it going, neutral. Okay, now let's practice that one with music. 5, 6, halftime, here we go. 1, 2, 3, circle. 1 and 2. Here we go, full time. Our next hip action in bachata is going to be a half circle going back. So it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay, so as you notice, I'm not taking 3 steps now. I'm just taking a step that's big enough that it will occupy the same amount of space that my side together side tap would take up, so that I can do my hip circle and then bring the leg in. So I'm taking a nice big step and I'm going on to a straight knee. This is the first hip action that we're doing today that's actually done on a straight knee, because I'm creating the circle by sending my weight back onto the heels. And if I do it with bent knees, it just has a different feel about it. It doesn't look as nice. So I want to go out on a straight knee, and then I'm going to send my hips back and around until they come to the side, and then I'm just going to bring that foot in. I'm not going to do a full circle. I'm just going back, side, and bringing the leg in. So from the front, I go 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay? The other common mistake that students make when they do this is they really incline with the torso. I want you to try and keep your torso as vertical as possible when you do this movement, so you're actually creating an arch in your back to send your hips back and around. So we're not doing this. We're keeping our torso pretty much vertical and sending the hips back by creating an arch and then coming back into neutral. So I go 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay, let's practice it a couple more times and then we'll try it with music. We go 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. Now let's do it with music. 5, 6, here we go. Here we go, real time. Now we are going to do a half circle forward with our basic, which looks like this. 1, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. Okay, so this is kind of subtle. I'm going to keep my knees gently bent for the entire basic while I'm using this hip action, because I'm using my crunching action in my abdominals, and I find it's easier to access that when my knees are just gently bent. So on 1 and 3, I'm going to crunch as I step. So I go 1, neutral, 3, tap. 1, neutral, 3, tap. 1, neutral, 3, tap. 1, neutral, 3, tap. And I'm going to do it to the side so that you can see better how my body is moving. So I go 1, neutral, 3, tap, 1, 3, tap. Crunch, crunch, tap, crunch, crunch, tap. So as I said in the beginning of this segment, it's a subtle movement. It's not exaggerated like this or like the leading with the hip, but it is a nice way to mix up the way that you your bachata basic. Okay, so now let's try that one with music. Halftime, here we go. We go 1, 3, 1, 3. Real time, we go. Our next movement is a figure 8 starting backward. So it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. So as you can see, I'm doing an 8, but now instead of crunching to start my figure 8 forward, I'm starting it backward. And on this one, just like the half circle back, I find it's easier to grab onto this movement if my knees are pretty straight. So if I step out on my right, I'll do it facing away. I'm going to send my right side of my hip back and around forward. Then as I step on my left, I'm sending my left back and around. Then I go back and around and neutral on the tap. Then I go back and around, back and around, back and around, tap. Back and around, back and around, back and around, tap. Back, around forward, back, forward, and tap. And it's important that we really try to isolate one side of our body, that we're not doing the whole pelvis, which would look like this. Back and around, back and around, back and around. See, that's different. That's just doing your half circle back, but on every single step. So I really want to send this side back and around, then the left side back and around, and the right side back and around, so that I'm really creating my figure 8. Okay, so let's practice that a couple more times. We go. Back, forward, back side forward, and tap. Back side forward, back side forward, and tap. Back side forward, tap. Back side forward, and tap. Now let's try it with music. 5, 6, halftime, here we go. We go 1. Real time, here we go. Our final hip action to use in a bachata basic today is going to be a hip pulse back and forward. So that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, tap. 1, 2, 3, tap. And as you can see on this one, I'm also adding the hip pulse on the tap, pushing into the ground, lifting the hip, and letting it fall back. But we'll get to that in a moment. So let's learn what's happening with the pelvis. All I'm doing with my pelvis is I'm going back, neutral, back, neutral, back, 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 back. I know that going forward for a lot of people is more comfortable than going back. And in this movement, we're actually not going forward at all. It might look like I am, but where it looks like I'm going forward, I'm just coming back into neutral because I don't want to have a really big movement. This is nice and small and subtle. So I go back, 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 hip, back, 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 hip. So every time I take a step, I'm taking the pelvis back and back and back and hip up and down, okay? So I'll show you from the back. I go back and back and back and hip and back and back and back and hip and back, neutral, up, down, back, neutral, back, neutral, up, down, back, neutral, up, down, back, neutral, up, down. Now let's try that one with music. 5, 6, half time, we go. Ready to go real time? Here we go.
Thanks so much for following this lesson, 7 ways to use your hips in your bachata basic. I hope that you enjoyed yourself and you found it useful. If you did, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the post notifications so you can see when I upload more stuff like this. Also, follow me on Instagram at DanceDoctorOnline. And if you followed this lesson and you feel good about what you did and you take a video, don't forget to tag me in the video or send me a private message so I can see how you did. I love seeing you all dancing. It makes this all worth it. So until next time, keep dancing.